from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is on the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. In Guatemala, various social sectors, indigenous and farmers group began a general strike this Thursday to demand the resignation of President Alejandro Giammattei and the Attorney General, both accused of corruption. Thousands took to the streets in protest over state mismanagement and the government's apparent unwillingness to tackle corruption, which has extended to the lack of transparency in the distribution of vaccines amid the health crisis. Pressure has been building since Attorney General Consuelo Porras fired the country's anti-corruption special prosecutor Juan Francisco Sandoval on July 23rd. Sandoval said after his firing that as his investigations got closer to Giammattei and members of his cabinet, Porras made efforts to block him. In Peru this Thursday, President Pedro Castillo attended a symbolic swearing-in ceremony in Ayacucho, where the independence of Peru is decided on the battlefield. During the act in the southern Peruvian highlands, President Castillo was presented with a staff symbolic of leadership in indigenous Quechua culture by the mayor of Huamanga province. As part of the program, attended by leaders and diplomats from Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia and Argentina, as well as Peruvian Congress members, traditional performances and an award ceremony were held at the historic site, where an imposing 45-meter-high marble obelisk stands in tribute to the compatriots who fought in the Battle of Ayacucho on December 9th, 1824, achieving the independence of Peru from Spanish colonial rule. In Colombia, a migratory crisis in the northwestern department of Antioquia has led to the collapse of public services and sparked fears of a massive outbreak of COVID-19. Some 10,000 people are stranded in the municipality of Noclocli, from where they hope to cross into Panama, which has closed its border en route to the United States. Local officials say some 800 more people arrive daily, many of whom have paid large sums to human traffickers before being abandoned to their fate. Local authorities have called on the national government to provide aid and resources to prevent a humanitarian disaster, but the requests have fallen on deaf ears.
We've gone over the plan with the Minister of the Interior, who directly and through the Vice Ministers has coordinated actions with the governors and mayors. Also, we've broadly approached the mayor of Necoclí, with whom we have consolidated a line of action. In this way, we have also spoken with the Minister of Defense on the purpose of reinforcing the border crosses in Nariño, actions that will be led by the Minister Diego Molano, ahead of the armed forces, especially the Army and the National Police. All of this I said to conclude that on the coming August 5th, we have summoned the Intersectorial Commission Against Migratory Traffic for technical assessment. The commission will be presided by the Chancellor of the Republic and requires the assistance of mayors of the region, who are to discuss a plan of action that the national government will present in order to support Necoclí.
Chile has seen fresh protests that demand the immediate release of political prisoners detained during the October 2019 anti-government demonstrations. Social, political and human rights organizations rallied in front of the Supreme Court of Justice in the capital Santiago to demand the immediate release of the hundreds of mainly young people who have remained behind bars without trial for almost 2 years. Relatives of the prisoners called for the immediate approval of the general pardon bill presented by opposition senators. A tsunami warning issued for part of the state of Alaska has been lifted after a strong 8.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast on Wednesday night. The quake, the strongest since 1964, was located about 56 miles east-southeast of Perryville, Alaska, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. At 29 miles deep, the earthquake is considered shallow. There have been at least 2 strong aftershocks, including a preliminary magnitude 6.2 and magnitude 5.6. While the tsunami warning was cancelled, the situation is still being monitored. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said he will request Russia's support to deploy guards along his country's border with Azerbaijan following recent clashes. Russia played a key role in mediating an end to the conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region last year.
It makes sense to consider the question of stationing outposts of Russian border guards along the entire stretch of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, which will help the two countries to carry out work on demarcation and delimitation of the border without the risk of military clashes. We are planning to discuss the matter with our Russian colleagues.
Russia's lab module successfully docked with the International Space Station on Thursday, 8 days after it was launched. The module will provide additional crew quarters, a new toilet and water and oxygen regeneration equipment, improving the conditions of cosmonauts' stay on the station and increasing the safety of the entire International Space Station crew. The module will also be a new science facility, docking port and spacewalk airlock for future operations. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Cuba, vaccination for pregnant and breastfeeding women using the Abdala vaccine began this Thursday, prioritised as a vulnerable group. Health authorities announced that some 800 women will receive the first of 3 doses of the Abdala vaccine by Friday. Previously certified vaccination centres were selected in all municipalities, and the vaccination drive will begin with pregnant women aged 19 and over who are in the 2nd or 3rd trimester of their pregnancy. Vietnam and Cuba are set to work together to produce vaccines against the novel coronavirus. In a telephone conversation with the Cuban ambassador to Vietnam, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh underlined the interest in cooperation with the Caribbean island to obtain licenses, supplies and technology transfers to produce vaccines. The official also highlighted the historical ties between the two nations and noted that both are making efforts to overcome the difficulties caused by COVID-19 and to enhance collaboration in this and various other fields. Uruguay's Ministry of Public Health announced it will offer all those vaccinated with China's Sinovac jabs with a booster shot of Pfizer. The news comes as the Delta variant was detected in the country less than 2 weeks ago, and it's hoped that it will increase the population's immunity to COVID-19. People will be able to receive the Pfizer booster 90 days after receiving the second of the Coronavac shots. Authorities announced that the country has purchased enough Pfizer doses to cover the almost 1.5 million people eligible for a booster shot. Uruguay has fully vaccinated more than 61% of its population using vaccines produced by Sinovac, Pfizer and AstraZeneca, according to Health Ministry data. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that Latin America and the Caribbean face an avalanche of worsening health issues if COVID-19 disruption of health services continues. PAHO Director Carissa Etienne stressed that the situation threatens immunization of children and care of expectant mothers and people with chronic conditions. She added that in a recent survey of health services in the region, 97% of participating countries and territories reported disrupted health services, while 45% reported disruptions in at least half of their health services. Over 300,000 children, mostly in Mexico and Brazil, have missed routine immunizations, leaving them vulnerable to deadly yet preventable infections.
Last week, there were over 1,200,060 COVID-19 cases in nearly 20,000 deaths, only in the Americas. COVID-19 is still having disastrous effects in our region, where Argentina, Colombia, Cuba, Ecuador and Paraguay are among the countries that report the highest mortality levels at a weekly rate in all the world. The cases have overly duplicated in the United States last week, mainly in non-vaccinating people. Mexican states of Baja California, Quintana and Yucatan also registered a rise in new infections.
Portugal is set to begin winding down COVID-19 pandemic restrictions ahead of a forecast 70% of people being fully vaccinated by the end of this summer. The Health Ministry reported that so far 52% of the target population of people over 16 years old has been fully vaccinated. Prime Minister Antonio Costa announced 3 phases of staggered relaxation of restrictions stretching over the next 3 months. From Sunday, localised curfews will end and restrictions on the opening times of restaurants, stores and cultural venues will be lifted. However, a digital virus pass proving inoculation or a negative test will be needed to enter restaurants at weekends or on public holidays when they are most busy, and for gyms and sports and cultural events.
And in this moment in which over 50% of the people are vaccinated is when we can take a step forward, managing the pandemic according to the vaccination rate, because during this wave it has shown how vaccination is really effective. Less cases, less hospitalizations and less deaths. So we need to continue with this strategy.
A further 60 million vaccine doses will be made available to African countries under the COVAX system. The news was welcomed by the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa, but it was stressed that it was nowhere near enough.
It would be progress compared to where we are today, but it would not be going far enough. We've estimated that we need about 820 million doses to be able to reach a coverage level of 30% of the population by the end of the year. So 60 million certainly is a step in the right direction, but it is nowhere near what is needed to reach that ambition, that target by the end of the year. So clearly,
Indonesia has reported a child mortality rate due to COVID-19 greater than that of any other country, with hundreds of children having died in recent weeks. Many of the victims were under the age of 5, challenging the idea that children face minimal risk from COVID-19, doctors say. The news comes as the country confronts its biggest surge yet in coronavirus cases overall, and as its leaders face mounting criticism that they've been slow to act. The jump in child deaths coincides with the surge of the Delta variant, which has swept through Southeast Asia, where vaccination rates are low, causing record outbreaks. Over 1.6 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in China, according to information provided by the National Health Commission on Thursday. Multiple regions of the country recently reported locally transmitted COVID-19 cases with the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant. Health authorities reiterated that this is not the time to lower the guard or relax anti-epidemic efforts against the import and local outbreak of cases. Vaccination points have been set up all around China in order to boost the rollout process. China has reiterated that its military forces are ready to respond to any provocation from the United States soon after a U.S. warship crossed the Taiwan Strait for the 7th time this year. China accused the United States on Thursday of being the single biggest cause of friction and threats in the Taiwan Strait, while a statement from the People's Liberation Army said troops were ready to respond to all threats and provocations and would defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Meanwhile, a spokesperson voiced firm opposition to any form of military contact between the US and China's Taiwan region and urged the US government to respect the One China principle. Officials also announced coordinated military drills with Russia set for August, which will see the mobilization of 10,000 troops. China highlighted on Thursday that the country has been promoting Afghan peace talks on the basis of full respect for Afghanistan's sovereignty, while 20 years of foreign intervention has proved to be a complete failure.
The hasty withdrawal of the US and NATO forces from Afghanistan marks the complete failure of the Afghan policy of the United States. It must shoulder responsibility for what it has done and mustn't shift the blame and responsibility to others and simply take to its heels. It needs to take concrete actions to prevent the terrorist forces from festering and make sure the withdrawal doesn't lead to turbulence and fighting. It also needs to play its due role in peace and reconstruction in Afghanistan.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. There's more anger in the West Bank after the Israeli occupation forces killed a 12-year-old Palestinian boy. According to Palestinian authorities, 12-year-old Mohammed al-Alami died after being shot by Israeli soldiers while traveling in a car with his father in the West Bank town of Bet Umma, northwest of Hebron. Alami was the second young Palestinian to be killed by Israeli fire in days after 17-year-old Mohammed Muna al-Tamimi died on Saturday of gunshot wounds inflicted the day before in the Palestinian village of Beita. As al-Alami's funeral was held, Palestinians expressed their rejection of the occupying forces.
They took away my son. They took my son away from me. Allah suffices me, for he is the best disposer of affairs. This is a terrorist state like no other existed before.
Several hundred marched in Chad's capital on Thursday against the ruling military junta. The opposition Transformers Party and civil society groups called the demonstration against the confiscation of power by the so-called Transitional Military Council that has ruled the country since the death of President Idris Deby in April. They demanded a national conference to overhaul the junta's charter and restore democracy in the former French colony. Some protesters held signs reading "France out of Chad." French President Emmanuel Macron met with the new rulers while attending Idris Deby's funeral, the only Western head of state to make the journey. Though the junta has promised free and transparent elections after an 18-month transition that could be extended, it also dissolved parliament and repealed the constitution.
A feeling of satisfaction because we were able to march without any clashes taking place. We have demonstrated, as Max Loengard said earlier, we are mature, we are capable, we are responsible for carrying out a truly peaceful march, which for once we have been allowed to do. All the Chadians who came out are demanding justice for everyone. They are calling for a sovereign and inclusive national conference, not like the dialogue that excludes the majority of Chadians. Today, we feel that the CMT wants to stay in power forever, not for 18 months, but for 36 months and maybe for another 30 years.
At least 18 civilians were killed in a fresh attack in western Niger near the border with Mali, according to media reports on Thursday. The attack in the Tillaberi region followed a similar one on Sunday that killed 14. Without explaining the circumstances of the attack, a local official said militants were suspected to be responsible. No group has claimed responsibility. Rampant insurgency in the region previously targeted security forces, but this year attacks have targeted civilians amid increasing ethnic conflicts. Previous attacks in Tillaberi have been blamed on an affiliate of the terror group Daesh or the Islamic State. The UN mission in Mali reported that peacekeepers repelled 2 attacks targeting its patrols on Wednesday. The mission, which includes over 18,000 personnel, has seen several attacks in recent months as terrorist groups up their operations in the Sahara region.
The UN mission in Mali reports that yesterday, peacekeepers repelled 2 attacks targeting its patrols. The first took place in Kidal. An armored vehicle was damaged, but there were no casualties. The second attack happened north of Douentza in the Mopti region, in an area where peacekeepers had defused an improvised explosive device earlier in the day. In the past 3 weeks, there have been 15 attacks against peacekeepers in Mali, including 11 that involved improvised explosive devices. 15 mission staff were injured in these attacks, which also caused extensive material damage. Despite these challenges, the mission remains committed to carrying out its mandate and reiterated its support for the full implementation of the peace agreement.
Military junta authorities in Myanmar are seeking help from the international community to tackle the coronavirus as hospitals face collapse. Meanwhile, protests continue against the regime. Myanmar has seen 6 months of turmoil since the military deposed Aung San Suu Kyi's government. The nation is now struggling to beat back a new wave of COVID-19, with many hospitals ill-equipped to cope with a surging caseload after medical staff walked out in protest over the coup. Authorities are seeking money from a COVID-19 response fund set up by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and support from other friendly countries to fight the epidemic. On Thursday, protesters staged a brief flash mob in downtown Yangon, the country's largest city. The Syrian army has launched an operation against terrorist groups in an area of the country's southwest that has been under siege for over a month. The operation in Deir al-Balad, home to some 40,000 people, began early this Thursday after terrorists resisted an order to surrender their light weapons and cease hostilities. Authorities stated that the offensive will be carried out in different stages, seeking to resume the negotiations for the protection of the civilian population. Meanwhile, the terrorists bombarded their neighbourhoods and the local hospital, destroying medical equipment and supplies. At least 40 people have died and 150 others are missing after devastating floods hit parts of eastern Afghanistan, officials confirmed on Thursday. A rescue operation was underway to find the missing people after torrential rains overwhelmed Khandish district in Rotterdam province, about 200 kilometers northeast of the capital, Kabul. Nearly 80 houses were destroyed after floods swept through the area. Torrential downpours and flash floods kill scores of people annually in Afghanistan, where many poorly built homes, mostly in rural areas, are at risk of collapse. The Evergiven container ship, which blocked the Suez Canal, one of the world's busiest waterways, finally arrived in Rotterdam on Thursday after being released by authorities in Egypt. The ship, almost as long as the New York Empire State Building is tall, became wedged in the canal during a sandstorm on March 23rd, blocking the shortest shipping route from Asia to Europe that carries 10% of global maritime trade and provides Egypt with vital revenues. The Evergiven was held for over 3 months at the canal's Great Bitter Lake amid a financial dispute. It continued its voyage after the ship's Japanese owner reached a compensation settlement with canal authorities, following weeks of negotiations and a court standoff.
It is really special. It is extraordinary to see this type of ships. We are sailing really close to her, and that's a special feeling. I'm proud that Rotterdam can handle these ships and that we finally can finish the job on the Evergiven, and we hope it will be done quickly in order for her to get back to normal sailing. She will leave on Monday. We are offloading the Rotterdam and Hamburg cargo in Rotterdam. After that she will go to Felixstowe, and after that to Dunkirk, when she will go into dry dock to see if other repairs are necessary.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. Plus you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.